When it comes to politicians reflecting the character of the city, few can match the achievement of James Michael Curley. His political record was mixed, but his career, like his rise from poverty to a splendid home on the Jamaica Way, had the makings of legend. The Jamaica Plain Historical Society recently added to the lore by acquiring a number of photographs. To tell us about the find and plans for sharing with the public is the Society's president, Gretchen Grozier. Thank you very much for being with us, Gretchen.
Thank you for having us.
First of all, how did you find these old photos?
Our webmaster, Charlie Rosenberg, keeps a very close track on anything online that's for sale for Jamaica Plain. So he's always on the look for images and different things that are related to Jamaica Plain history, and he saw them. They were being offered for sale on eBay. The gentleman who had been offering them for sale had a fairly high asking price and was actually thinking about dividing up the collection and selling them just ones and twosies, and we were quick to jump on it and ask him if he could perhaps come down in price, which he did, I'm happy to say, even though it was a large expenditure for our society, and we bought the whole collection. There's 1,274 images.
Well, some of these images, they really do telegraph the character. I think there's one shot of him with the hat, and I mean, there's this, he's debonair, but with a dash of mischief.
Absolutely. He was a dapper individual, but he was a bit of a rascal. He wasn't called the Rascal King for nothing. And one of the great things about these images is that they do sort of go from 1934 up to 1958, so the last 25 years of his life. You can kind of see the arc of his career as a politician, as the mayor, and then sort of his later years as he's retiring and writing a book and being interviewed by Edward Murrow and settling into that senior statesman role, but always looking very good and always with a twinkle in his eye.
Well, there's a great difference between nowadays when politicians, they're soundbite people or they're Facebook people or they're on Twitter, and then you have Curley, even in the neighborhood. He was larger than life. He's walking his kid to school around the block.
Absolutely, and there are images. What we really loved about this collection is that there are so many images of him at home and in Jamaica Plain, and being a regular human being, walking down the street with everybody else. And there are lots of stories of people
with a police escort, though.
Well, yeah, with the police escort. And even when he's speaking, there's a lot of him on the campaign trail because he had still run for several offices in that time frame. With the crowds around him, surrounding him as he's made these speeches. And he really was known as a master orator, and so you get to see the crowds enthralled in some of these images as well, which is pretty amazing.
Well, oratory is different from a soundbite, and I guess that's what you had to do in those days because you couldn't be on TV. There was no TV. There was some radio, but if you really wanted to reach people, you had to have a crowd around you.
It's
with
absolutely
bullhorns,
true. Yeah, absolutely. And he would have these, amplification methods, but he made these speeches and long speeches from memory, and he was wonderful and thrilling. And there are actually albums of him speaking. And so now that we've had our collection up online and people have started to see it, people are starting to reach out to us with, I have an image of him with another person, or I have an album of his speeches, can I give that to you? So our collection, I think, is going to grow because of just this first step into this era.
Well, a lot of his prime was in the 1930s, and there's one image of him, he's on the stump, and I think it's with an Italian-American group, and there's this big picture of him on the podium. It almost looks like, my gosh, this could be Stalin or Mussolini here. I mean, but it's here in Boston.
It's true, and brand was everything even back then, so you wanted to make sure that people saw you speaking, they saw the picture, and they equated those two things together. So he was very good at promoting himself and his legacy, I guess, or the start of his legacy. I guess it would have been back then in the 30s. But yes, there was, there wasn't a website to go to, so you really wanted to make sure people knew when the person that was speaking was James Michael Curley. So we have lots of great images of him with his campaign material, which always does have a big picture of him on it.
You do have some photos of the Curley mansion, but most of them were from a very sad occasion. It was a funeral. That's
right. His son and daughter, actually, her daughter and son died on the same day. And so there was a funeral of those two from the house. They were buried on the same day together. And then he lost his first wife as well. So we have images of that funeral. They're all buried together, and there's a chapel at Our Lady of Lourdes in Jamaica Plain, which is dedicated to them. And then he remarried and moved to a different house, but still in Jamaica Plain, just on the other side of the pond. So we have images of both houses, both families. And then we actually have images of his funeral, which was in 1958 until Senator Kennedy died, the largest funeral in Massachusetts history.
Finally, speaking of Jamaica Plain and the pond, he's out there with the fish.
Yeah.
That looks familiar. I mean, I've seen Baker, Deval Patrick, and
Yeah, they just did it a couple weeks ago.
Right.
The mayor is always out there, and the governor stocking the pond with trout. And I think I've seen Michael Curley with a salmon, so I don't know if he just had a little extra in the budget at that point for salmon. But
So anything that's planned, I know these are all online so people can go and feast their eyes, but is there anything else going on about sharing this with the public and the whole Curley story?
Well, the images that we bought are actually reverse negatives. They're from a newspaper morgue, so we actually had them digitized into images that people can see, and a lot of various groups were involved in that. The Boston Public Library and UMass Amherst and UMass Boston, lots of volunteer effort. And now that they're online, we're hoping that people will look at them and come up with ideas about how we can celebrate the legacy of this most infamous Jamaica Plain resident. There is a big move afoot to make his house, which is owned by the city, more accessible to the public. There was just an RFP with the city of Boston to make it into some sort of visitor center, and we're hoping that our images can be part of creating some displays and panels there that will talk about the history of James Michael Curley and what he meant for the city, for the Commonwealth, and even for the country, and particularly for Jamaica Plain.
Well, I'm sure you've been inside the house, and I haven't. I only seen it from the, I know those shamrocks on the shutters, but it's spectacular.
It's a wonderful house. He gave it originally to the Oblate Fathers, so it had been divided up. The upstairs is a little divided up into cells, I guess is what monks sleep in, but the downstairs is intact. And in fact, they couldn't move his dining room table, which was specifically created for this large oval dining room. It was just too large and too heavy, so it has always remained in the house, so it's still there. And it's a wonderful space, and you can see from our images in our collection, there are some very staged family portraits, but also just him in his study reading and smoking his pipe. And those spaces are all still intact, so we're really hopeful that the city will find a great tenant for that space who will take it over, have it be used for the city, and he really wanted it to be used in some way. So the White Fund purchased it for the city, and they'll help make sure that it's being used. And we really hope that we can run our Jamaica Pond tour that goes 3 times a summer out of the house so that people can spend a little time learning about Mayor Curley, go and walk around the pond and come back and visit as well.
And finally, the website for the Historical Society?
It is www.jphs.org.